On August 6, 1997, a Korean Air Boeing 747-3B5 operated scheduled flight KE-801 on the Seoul-Aganya route. There were 231 passengers and 23 crew members on board. The crew consisted of 3 pilots and 20 flight attendants. According to Korean Air, the crew arrived at the airport at 21:05. According to the original plan, the crew was to fly to Dubai, UAE. However, due to the lack of rest of the captain, the flight assignment was changed, and now the crew had a shorter flight KE-801 to Aganya, Guam. Previously, the captain flew this route 9 times and knew it quite well. The crew collected the necessary documents and conducted independent training. At 21:27 hours, flight KE-801 left the platform and at 21:53 took off from Gimpo Airport and headed for Aganya. According to the recordings of the voice recorder, the captain was in charge of the aircraft during the entire flight. At 1:03, when the aircraft was at an altitude of 41,010 feet and approximately 275 miles northwest of the Nimitz radio beacon, the co-pilot established contact with the Guam Airport approach controller. At 1:05 hours, the controller transmitted approach instructions to runway 6L and at 1:10 hours instructed to descend to an altitude of 2,598 feet. In response, the co-pilot acknowledged the receipt of the information and announced his readiness to begin the descent. Then the captain gave the rest of the crew a short briefing on the approach to the airport at the rate of the ILS glide path system. Then at 1:13 he said it was time to descend, so the co-pilot informed the air traffic controller that Flight 801 was starting to descend from 41,010 feet to 2,598 feet. During the descent, it became clear that the weather conditions in Guam were continuously deteriorating. At that time it was the rainy season. In addition, the localizer did not work, as it was undergoing maintenance, which greatly complicated the landing. Based on the cockpit recording, the captain, who did not have time to properly rest before departure, was probably more worried that the parking in Guam was scheduled for only 3.5 hours, after which they had a return flight. At 1:26 the flight engineer said he was seeing Guam. At 1:31, the crew of the aircraft reported that due to cumulonimbus clouds they were requesting a radar vector for landing on runway 6L. The controller instructed to make a left turn to heading 090 degree in order to enter the landing course. The airliner was currently passing 2,798 feet with flaps extended 10 degrees and landing gear retracted. At 1:39 hours, the co-pilot reported that he was observing glide slope capture on instruments, although the radio beacon was not working. Hearing from the co-pilot that the course glide path system was working, the flight engineer expressed surprise and asked to double-check. But the captain also stated that the glide path was working despite the flight engineer's repeated warnings that the course glide path system was faulty. At 1:40 hours, about 10 miles from the runway threshold, the crew began their descent from 2,637 feet. The plane passed the height of 2,398 feet, and after a few seconds the captain nevertheless noticed that the glide path this time was not working accurately. At 1:40, the approach controller instructed to switch to communication with the launch controller, which the crew did at 1:40. By that time, Flight 801 was 7 miles from the runway, 3 miles from the VOR, and at an altitude of less than 2,001 feet. At 1:41, the controller cleared Flight 801 for landing, so at 1:41, while passing 1,804 feet, the flaps were set to the landing position, 30 degrees, and the landing gear was extended. There were no more radio messages from the board. At 1:41, Flight 801 passed 1,400 feet and the GPWS ground proximity system activated in the cockpit. At 1:41, the captain asked if the glide slope was working and gave the command to turn on the windshield wipers, but no response was found on the voice recorder from the co-pilot or flight engineer. At 1:41 the aircraft was at an altitude of 1,099 feet and 4 miles from the threshold when the co-pilot, reading the points of the checklist, asked, "Does anyone see the runway?" And after a couple of seconds, the GPWS system reported an altitude of less than 498 feet, which caused the flight engineer to exclaim in amazement. Descending at 13 knots, the aircraft passed 839 feet at 1:42, and the GPWS issued a voice warning, minimums. After another 5 seconds, when passing an altitude of 728 feet, the co-pilot announced that it was necessary to go around, and a second later both of them and the flight engineer reported that they did not see the runway. Then the steering wheel was slightly pulled towards itself, after which the liner slowly, at a speed of about 1°/cc, began to raise its nose, while continuing to decline. At 1:42, 3 miles from the threshold of the runway number 6L of Agani Airport, flying at an altitude of 659 feet above sea level, flight KE-801 crashed into a hill in the Nimitz Hill area and completely collapsed. According to the testimonies of the surviving passengers, everything happened so quickly that they did not even have time to scream. Jet fuel spilled from the damaged fuel tanks ignited, causing an extensive fire that lasted for 8 hours. Due to the inaccessibility of the scene and the blockage of the only small road leading to the crash site, rescuers were able to reach only a few hours later. The crash killed 228 people, 14 crew members, all 3 pilots and 11 flight attendants, and 214 passengers. Only 26 people survived, 23 passengers and 3 flight attendants. The investigation into the causes of the crash of flight KE-801 was conducted by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB. Among the possible causes of the disaster were engine failures and difficult weather conditions. During landing, visibility was 1 mile. The American National Aviation Safety Association issued a statement accusing the crew of erroneous actions that led to the disaster. Korean Air issued a protest. According to her, on the day of the disaster at the Guam airport, the radar landing system was not working, which was supposed to warn the pilots about the dangerous descent of the aircraft. Korean experts found that a mistake was made in the compilation of the computer program for the guidance service. In addition, it turned out that on that day the glide path drive, ensuring the correct landing trajectory of the aircraft, also worked with a defect. American experts argued that the crew was warned about the shutdown of the radar system and he had to focus on the readings of the instruments. The American side stated that the systems located on the ground could not cause a disaster. South Koreans called the main reason for the crash of Flight 801 the difficult weather conditions in which the crash occurred, in particular heavy rain. They flatly rejected the suggestion that the captain of Flight 801 was inexperienced or tired during the flight. The parties agreed only that at the time of the crash the aircraft was fully operational. Neither the records of the flight recorders nor the actions of the crew indicated any kind of malfunction, because this board was one of the presidential aircraft for 6 years and was monitored more carefully. The final report of the NTSB investigation was released on January 13, 2000. The National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of the accident was the failure of the captain to properly inform and execute a non-precision approach, and the failure of the co-pilot and flight engineer to effectively monitor and recheck the performance of the approach by the captain. This was facilitated by the fatigue of the captain and insufficient training of the Korean Air flight crew. Also contributing to this was the FAA's intentional ban on the minimum safe altitude warning system in Guam and the agency's failure to properly manage the system. One of the explanations for the disaster is given from the standpoint of sociology and cultural studies and lies in the specifics of Korean culture. A number of cross-cultural studies in the field of aviation safety have shown that one of the causes of such accidents is often the so-called power distance index in the cockpit. According to original research by sociologist Geert Hofstede, conducted in the 1970s, the Republic of Korea is among the countries of the world with a high power distance index. In such cultures, social hierarchy is of great importance, and as a result, it is not customary to object to elders in them, including, in the cockpit, it is not customary to question the actions of the captain. In the history of aviation, a number of cases have been recorded when disasters occurred due to the fact that the pilots did not dare to object to the captain at the moment when he made a mistake critical for the flight, or insist on his own in communication with airport air traffic controllers, etc. This is exactly what happened on board flight KE-801. According to the transcription and interpretation of the voice recorder recording, the co-pilot's statements showed that he hinted at the captain's mistake several times and could even have managed to save the plane if he insisted or took control, but the pilot did not dare to do this.